Good morning, good morning. Oh, I'll see you there. That's better. How are you? What a rainy day today. So, what should we talk about today? I'll tell you what. Let's talk about that stupid chancellor who really does not know how to do her job. Rachel Reeves, who's got two beliefs. One is that everything is done better in the private sector, in the public sector, and the other belief is that everything could be paid for quite easily if only the rich would pay a bit more. Despite the fact that the top 1% of taxpayers pay 29% of all the tax. So it sort of slipped under the radar a bit because it hasn't been reported on the news. But we'll just turn the lights on because it's quite dark. But the Chancellor has referred private dentistry to the Competition and Markets Authority. And now, everybody of a certain age will know that, on hearing that it will remind you straight away of the government referring the dentistry market to the Consumers Association as a super complaint, the very first super complaint. And a super complaint in those days was a complaint which they couldn't refuse to do, because technically they do have some discretion about whether they investigate it or not. And the Chancellor has referred to the CMA on the same basis, that they do, on paper at least, they have got sort of the option to refuse. But of course, in practice, they don't. I mean, this is a sort of a Godfather type suggestion. It's like it's an offer you can't refuse. We don't want Rachel Reeves to wake up with a horse's head in her bed. So the CMA will be rubbing its hands and saying, "Oh, this is great. Where do we? Who gives us the money? Where do we apply?" And they're going to do a study which is going to be a complete rerun of the old Consumers Association study. So she's asked the CMA to investigate basically competition. It's the Competition and Markets Authority. So, and I think the actual asking them to investigate it is almost more interesting than them just investigating it, because what she's asked them to do is, to a large extent, is duplicate, as I say, the work that was done that resulted in dentists having to publish fee scales and things like that. And most dentists, certainly in my area now, if you go on a dentist website, you can find a fee scale. And you can get a quote. Now, the problem they've got with dentistry, governments of both colours, is that you can't really get a quote without having a checkup. In fact, the GDC insists that you do a checkup. You cannot give a quote without doing a checkup, because the way the argument goes is that you can't recommend treatment without examining the patient first. Otherwise, how can you advise them what all their options are? But that sort of that does put cause a bit of a problem, doesn't it, for the consumer who can't get a quote, let's say, because they need some diagnostic work done. So there's a failure there to sort of understand the market. The market for dentistry is a certain type of market. So, and because I went back to the original, I was part of the original circus around the first investigation. That was the one, you remember, where the guy who's published the report came in and started talking about the General Dentistry Council instead of the General Dental Council because he hadn't read the report and knew sod all about it. And that brought in the three fees, the three bears porridge, you know, the small, medium and large fee, because they said that it would simplify things for consumers if they only had three choices or three bands. Whereas at the old system, which had over 400 fees, was totally incomprehensible. And they were talking about people that would quite happily walk into a Tesco's with over 400 foods there and buy their shopping. Not, you know, the analogy that Tesco's also had to charge one of three fees for absolutely everything in the store, and then it would all work out on swings and roundabouts was completely stupid, and yet they persisted with it. So that's where we got the banding came from, that original study. And also, you know, they used to do mystery shopper, where some stupid 21-year-old in a dark glasses and a floppy hat, who looked like somebody out of 1970s episode of The Persuaders, came in and said, "Oh, I think I need a root treatment. How much does it cost? I think I need a filling. How much does it cost?" And the answer was always the same. You need a checkup. We can't possibly tell you. All you can do is look on our website. Now, if you look on a website, you might conceivably get an idea of who the expensive surgeries are and who the cheaper ones are. And I think that's the most that you can expect. In fact, that's quite a good way of doing it, in my opinion. Just go and have a look and see what they charge generally. I mean, there'll be enough similar items, checkup, fillings, extractions, root treatments, for you to be able to see who's charging a bit more than and who's charging a bit less. That's the most you can do. And if you want to know what it's going to cost you to get some work done, dentistry in general, we don't do free quotes. I tried doing free quotes. I can tell you it doesn't work. Somebody drove into my fence. Now, I've had 3 people round to look at to quote me for a fence, and not one of them gave me a quote. It's just like, it's a very unsatisfactory way of doing things. You pay nothing, you get nothing. That's what it boils down to. And you know, dentistry requires some examination and diagnostics, treatment planning. It's not quite as simple as putting a fence up. You've got to take x-rays. Who pays for the x-rays? So all in all, I think they just don't understand the market. I can't even understand what the CMA is going to come up with that the OFT or whoever it was, Consumers Association, previous investigation didn't. Now, it's quite possible that the Rachel Reeves and the Labour government doesn't know that there was a previous inquiry along exactly these lines. And I'm not saying that the private market is perfect, but believe me, it's a market, and as a market with all its flaws, but mostly advantages in terms of setting a fair price for dentistry, I'm very happy with it. I'm certainly more happy with it than I am with the NHS, with its distorted monopsony and its lack of inspection and testing. I'll give you an example. lady came in to see me last week. Lovely lady, deaf from birth. Always had a lot of trouble communicating with. She'd written me a big long page of what she thought I might like to know about the fact that she got toothache. She'd been to an NHS dentist, had a tooth filled, and has had toothache ever since. So she come back to me, which is fine. We don't judge people for trying to get NHS treatment. That's, you know, you want NHS treatment. You don't want to come to the dentist. I don't care. You do you, you know. Anyway, she's come back and wants me to sort out this problem. Now, the first problem I notice is that she's, on the whole, she's got quite good teeth. Very little decay. She's in her 30s or early 40s. Probably got one or two fillings. And then all of a sudden she's got this occlusal in her lower left 7 composite, and it's a tiny composite. And because I qualified in 82, I've seen these sort of fillings, the pinhole ones, the ones where you just drop a tiny little round burr in the enamel and put a filling in. And in those days it used to be done because you got a fee. So if you did a DO and the patient had an ID block in and was already numb, you could do a little pinhole filling in another tooth, and that would bump your fee up by 50%. And who could prove that it wasn't necessary? Well, they used to be able to prove that it was statistically that it wasn't necessary at the Dental Estimates Board in Eastbourne, or the Dental Practice Board as it became. Because if you were a dentist that was doing more treatment on average in the town than any other dentist, then you were worthy of an investigation. Or if all of your fillings, if every patient's total of fillings could be divided by 2, then you were worthy of a tug. So, but of course that's all abolished now, really. There's no central, it's up to commissioning authorities. And the commissioning authorities are so desperate that it's the very worst dentists who will do NHS treatment at whatever price is being offered that are the ones that really shouldn't be in the profession. So immediately I look at this person who's, broadly speaking, got good teeth, and all of a sudden they've got a pinhole cavity. And not only that, one that is giving them toothache. Now, again, you wouldn't expect like a tiny little pinhole cavity to be giving toothache unless they've done something really seriously wrong. I don't know, such as like used the air rotor without water and overheated the nerve and killed the nerve, or put in a filling material that's so cheap that it's causing a massive allergic response. So I said to him, I'm going to have to take some bite wings to try and see what they've done. So sure enough, we did some bite wings, and it looked to me and my nurse, who's actually better at interpreting bite wings than I am now, that she had a caries in her upper 6 or her upper 7. So I said to her, so then immediately you think, right, possibly it's referred pain from the top to the bottom. Unlikely, because the decay, there's not that much decay in there, but there's definitely decay in there. So I said to her, look, I don't know about the bottom one, but I can fill the top one, and then you let me know if the pain goes away. Now, to cut a long story short, we filled the top one, and in the process of, bearing in mind that we vitality tested the bottom tooth and everything, so, but in the process of, oh, hello. He's taking a picture of his lorry. In the process of just checking the bite on the filling that we'd done up the top, we realised that there was like a imperceptible ridge of composite on the lower filling. not at all visible, but sticking up like a ridgeback tent. And it was almost certainly this tooth had been too high on the bite since it was done, which even with a small filling, you can build it up so it's too high on the bite. And so we said to the patient that's almost certainly what the problem was. Didn't invalidate the fact that she needed a filling up the top anyway, which we've got the x-rays to evidence. But we haven't heard a word from her, so not that she could ring us up anyway. But so it all seems to be fine. Now, that is an example of NHS treatment. And Rachel Reeves, in calling an investigation into the private dentistry, tells me she's under pressure. I think that her MPs are getting a lot of pushback from people who are saying, look, a joke's a joke. We haven't got any NHS dentistry. We haven't had any for nearly a decade now. What are you going to do about it? And the government seems to have adopted private dentistry now as part of the mix, which was a conscious decision they made when they brought in the contract in about 2004. They could have said to the dentists who were at the they could have said to the dentists who were had NHS contracts at the time, look, you either come in 100% on the NHS, or you can go private, but not both. But they didn't. Cockcroft was the chief dental officer at the time. And basically he was very arrogant. His attitude was, why would anyone want to go to a private dentist when I've organised such a brilliant NHS? Why would any dentist want to work privately when they get such a brilliant NHS pension? And so he sort of downplayed and disregarded the private sector at a point where he could have made dentists think very long and hard about where their future lay. I think there was a part of it that he was worried that they were going to say, in that case, forget the NHS, I'm going private. But I don't think that would have happened. I think it's more likely it would have happened the other way around. People would have gone, forget the little bit of private I'm doing, I'm going to just get a big fat NHS contract. And the fact that so many dentists stayed on the NHS at that point would have meant that it would have been more viable, both for the dentists and for the patients and for the dentists. But they didn't. So now they've got the private sector, and then so in one way, this CMA referral is almost like an endorsement of private dentistry as the future of dentistry. They're saying, well, look, if we can't provide NHS dentistry, which they can't because they're Brexit lint, then and patients are going to have to go privately, then we may as well try and make sure that they can go as cheaply as possible in the private sector. Because the thing that people do, obviously, is complain how expensive it is. Well, go on. Come on, little car, little person. So, but there's no point complaining about the market price of something whose price is set by the market. I mean, the price is the price. That's the whole thing. The price is set by thousands of individual dentists all deciding what their input costs are, how much they need to earn, and what the market will stand in their area for what they do based on their training. Now, we know, I've said in the past that the price of dentistry has never been cheap. In the early days, when I put evidence into the Doctors and Dentists Review Body, they published a table showing that we were about the top decile in terms of earnings. In other words, we earn more than 90% of the rest of the population and less than the top 10%. And that is, that's if you were to release dentistry underwater and see how far it will float up. That's how far it would float. It will float up to the top 10%. Then they stopped publishing that table because the idea was to try and depress dentist fees, and they didn't want us to see us going down the league table. Well, I mean, we knew we were anyway, but they just didn't want to publish it. So, and why is dentistry? Why does it cost what it does? Well, it's a unique combination of academic skills, business skills, and manual skills, and very few jobs. And I always do this. I'll challenge you to name one other job that involves a very high degree of proficiency in all three of those: manual, business, and academic. So that's why we were in the top 10%. And that's why the market price of dentistry is what it is. It's because that's what it costs. So there we go. I'm just going to annoy everybody. I'm going to annoy everybody this side of the roundabout, but then I'm not going to annoy everybody the other side of the roundabout. I'm just going to presume this lot are all turning left, which they're not, and they're all going to get very irritated about me going up this lane. So you've got a market referral by someone who doesn't know that we've already had a market referral, and there's naff all that can be done. And then you've got an acceptance pretty much by the by the government that private dentistry, market is going to be the way forward for most people. But I honestly don't know what they think is going to happen. That this is going to change absolutely nothing. In fact, I'll go so far as to say this is a case of wanting something to be seen to be done. Like they can't resurrect the NHS. That's been Cockcroft damaged that too badly. They can't bring down prices in the private sector. So I think this is really just a show. It's just a grand gesture to make the public and the MPs who get letters from the public all the time saying they can't find an NHS dentist, to make it look like that they are definitely doing something. And you'd have to be an idiot to think that this CMA inquiry is going to bring down prices in the private sector. What they should be doing is looking very closely at the NHS and what's being done on the NHS, because that's the system, that's the side of the profession that's failing. Private side is largely self-regulating and exists on a cadre of patients who appreciate quality and are quite happy to pay for what they get, and where the patients have to demonstrate value for money. It's the NHS market that's severely dysfunctional. Anyway, just before I finish, with this deaf lady, we did something which it just occurred to me that there must be an app that transcribes. And I came up with a thing called Google Transcribe, I think it's called. It's not Google Translate, but it's like that, except it just transcribes what you're saying. And it's absolutely brilliant, because this lovely lady, who's obviously struggles because of her hearing problems, and she's profoundly deaf, to the point where she has to type to me if she wants to say something. She types it, but she's used to doing that. But she's used to me not being able to write or type everything I need to say to her. But with this transcribe app, everything I say just comes up on the screen on the phone. And I can talk to her like I'm talking to you now. And it's pretty perfect, I would say. It's, I'm not going to say it's 100%. Transcription's still got a little way to go. I had a transcribed email I had an email from which was a transcribed voicemail the other day from a patient who said that they have a niggle in their tooth, and it came through as N asterisk 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 because the voice recognition had misinterpreted the word niggle. So it's not perfect, but believe me, this Google transcribe is fantastic. And for the first time, you know, I've been able to talk to her and say to her, look, you know, decay is cakes, biscuits and sweets, you know, is it okay if we do a couple of x-rays, etc., etc. All this stuff would have been very difficult and quite embarrassing for both of us to try and get across, you know, but now literally I can just talk to her like I'm talking to you now. So I would say for anyone who's deaf, and believe me, there's a lot of people who are deaf, because the bloke who came in immediately after her was also deaf. And he's a bloke in his late 30s. He's a builder. And I think he was deaf because of occupational deafness, you know. He said to me, he said, Derek, look, he said, I know I'm talking to you. He said, but I've got to tell you, he said, I'm pretty deaf. So for the most part, he said, I don't hear what you're saying. So, and what I do is I get it going on my phone and I give my phone to the patient to hold. So they can be sort of lying back, and then if they want to see what I'm saying, they just hold the phone up like that. And they can say yes and no, yes and no. Brilliant, it's a brilliant idea. Well, look at that. That is sleet. That's proper. No, it's not rain. That's semi-frozen. So I'm not getting out of the car yet. But you don't have to sit in here with me. You can get on with whatever you're doing. All right? Don't forget, Google Transcribe. And don't worry about the CMA. It's just a joke. Okay. Bye.